Hi everyone, I'm Shauna. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about conscious consumerism. What does it mean to be a conscious consumer, and is it anything different from mindful consumerism? Before we start talking about this subject, I first want to say why. Why are we here doing it anyways? Why are we going to get even this specific or compare definitions? I mean, the answer for me is kind of twofold. I have been talking about conscious consumerism on this channel, being specific, I am a conscious consumer, using that label, that discussion, for over a year now. And I have not once sat down to define what that means. I've thought in vague terms what I think it means and what I might want it to mean, but I have not gone down to create a definition for myself or look at definitions online to see how I align with that or how I want to take that and mold it for myself. I feel like I will be a better advocate on espousing that belief if I have a really clear idea of what it means and also what I don't want it to mean. But I also have a personal interest, this interest in alignment. I want to make sure that the ideals I have for myself, my values, the overall way I want to live my life, actually matches up with what I'm doing. I want my life to be lived with meaning and intention, and not in this just haphazard way where life is just happening to me. I really find it helpful to look at what's out there to see how that does or doesn't align with myself or my beliefs, to come up with this clear idea of what I think would be best. And I think that there's an interesting conversation to be had here too. So let's get started. Let's talk with conscious consumerism first. Now, I scoured the internet to see what are people describing this as, and I was a little surprised. And what people are describing as conscious consumerism is what I've described, at least in my mind, as ethical consumption. So this is a type of consumption that really aligns with sustainability and ethics, which kind of surprised me. I thought that it was more than that, but that's kind of basically the gist. So A. Good describes it as deliberately making purchasing decisions that one believes have a positive social, economic, environmental impact. So this can be buying from brands that have hashtag pull up for chain, avoiding brands that don't have inclusive sizing, let's say anything beyond an extra large, and supporting brands that do, avoiding brands that exploit their workers financially or, within working conditions, and supporting brands that offer fair wages and conditions, avoiding brands that don't offer robust shade ranges, supporting brands that do, supporting small businesses, minority-owned businesses, avoiding products that test on animals or contain animal products. Conversely, buying vegan or buying cruelty-free, avoiding products or brands that exploit the environment or contribute to climate change. An article from Startup it was an article that was intended for businesses, writes, conscious consumerism focuses on making positive decisions throughout the buying process with the intention of helping balance some of the negative impacts that consumerism has on the planet. Their definition is way more vague and tends to be more focused on climate change and environmental impacts. The first one is a little bit more robust in terms of ethical considerations. However, they continue, the overall aim is to use consumers' purchasing power to consider the impact on the environment or in society, for example, of what people buy, as well as why and how they make purchases. What I do like about that second definition is that a purchase doesn't have to be required to have a conscious line of thinking, or that it involves something beyond the purchase. It's not a very in-depth article, and it's like a business-to-business kind of thing, so that definition wasn't great, but this is also what people are reading to educate themselves, like business people. Now, I talked about my own stance on cruelty-free in the past. I have a whole video on it, ethics and beauty. I'll link that in the cards for you to watch if you're so inclined. The gist of that video and the gist of my take is that I'm not cruelty-free because it really boils down the issues in makeup consumption, the ethical issues in makeup consumption, to one issue, and also cruelty-free tends to be the issue to be concerned about. which often creates this moral line: cruelty free or good, non-cruelty free or bad. And even then, like, I have so many thoughts on the topic about the racial overtones of the discussion, especially because it revolves primarily around China. Just questioning the effectiveness of the campaign beyond making people feel better about themselves. Like, I have lots of thoughts, so go check out that video if you're so inclined. I think these terms are getting used interchangeably. There isn't a huge difference between conscious consumerism and ethical consumerism in the ways that online communities are using the term. I think one of the biggest differences might be who you're talking to, where the term ethical consumption is really loaded with moralism and, of course, ethics. So that might be a good word choice for a specific audience, whereas others, like, let's say you were talking about minimalism, or to minimalist aligned communities, conscious consumerism might be the better choice. But conscious consumerism, I think is a fairly broader term than ethical, where you could apply other things that weren't specifically mentioned. My own personal definition goes a little bit farther, but in basic ways that I feel like are left out. And consumption is an act. So it makes sense for these articles, these people, to think about the buying process only. However, how someone makes their choice to shop, period, I think is consciousness and should be part of conscious consumerism. Thinking about how and why I shop matters just as much, perhaps more, than the act of shopping. Some people shop beyond their means, financially, but also beyond their means of their storage capacities or their ability to use what they own. And that's normal for a lot of people. And anything other than that feels like conscious. Mindful consumption is described in really similar ways. Okay, I just have to share this one definition that was used in the Australian Marketing Journal. They say that it's based on Buddhist and psychological perspectives of mindfulness. There's a bit of a more discussion of that, like, late in the article, but we gotta put that up front, dudes. Here, the focus is on mindfulness instead of mindless consumption. Now, mindful.org writes that it's the ability to be fully present, aware of where we are and what we're doing, and not overly reactive or overwhelmed by what's going on around us. The minimalist vegan articulates that mindless consumption is consuming for your own benefit. I'd probably say it's consuming without much thought or consideration. I want it, therefore I buy it. But they also go on to quote a definition from a 2010 article, writing that mindful consumption is premised on consciousness and thought and behavior about the consequence of consumption. I like that phrasing, the consequence of consumption, because it implies both personal and larger consequences. It can include some of the things we mentioned earlier, ones that have to do with ethics or the environment, social consequences, but also things like financial consequences for the self. Now, what I was considering conscious consumerism seems to be more in line with what is mindful consumption, and I really like this connection to the practice of mindfulness and being present in thought and being deliberate and being intentional about your purchasing choices and the fact that you're purchasing anything to begin with. We have this presentness of mind of when we're buying something and why we're buying something. And ultimately, I think if we need to buy something, my view is that mindfulness would act in the time of purchase, but also before that, to think if we actually need something. The mindful consumption articles go the farthest in actually thinking about your choices and having that internal dialogue with yourself. And mindful consumption overall feels more in line with the introspection and thinking about consuming behaviors. Let's think about why we're buying anything at all in the first place. Why do we feel drawn to buy things? I do think that shopping has ethical components to it. And I think it is equally about shopping with intention instead of impulsivity and mindlessness. And that is where I think mindful consumption beats out conscious consumption for me, just in terms of what it encompasses. Mindful consumption really, it has some of the ethical components to it, but is not as focused on the ethics and more about the process that we use to think about our consumption. None of these definitions or articles so far has really gone far enough for me personally into questioning the thought process behind shopping or personal consequences like death or accumulation of stuff. I get that these terms are really about connecting ourselves beyond ourselves into the larger world around us. I get it. I really, really do. However, I do think that personal consequences are tied to ones outside of us, because if we're thinking strictly in an environmental sense, and we're worried about the climate change or climate crisis, guess what? Buying nothing is always better than buying something. So right there, your personal choice is connected to the environment. I do think that people can be more motivated by personal consequences than larger societal ones, although they can be a driving factor when we do have to make that choice in general. And I do think that people who are inclined to think about the ethics of things are also inclined to think about their own purchasing patterns and behaviors, although it's not inherently a one-for-one. If you're coming across these definitions for the first time, the exclusion of that might be a little bit of a disservice, because you might not think about, let's say, financial components to things, or personal accumulation of stuff, or anything else that we've talked about in this no-buy space. Okay, I think that the way that I've been thinking about conscious consumerism tends to fall more in line with the way that minimalists think about these things, or how they think about shopping or consumption. I mean, I find that quite interesting, given that I've been dunking on minimalism a little bit. And I do think that minimalist shopping habits is also a time of mindful consumption, but where is that attitude here? There's no real financial talk or ideas of even like personal fulfillment that are all up in the no-buy and minimalist spaces. These definitions and concepts seem so severed. Why do I have to go to minimalism to think about intentional living, or living a life that makes me feel more fulfilled, and like not having to go to stuff to define my identity, or financial health, having too much stuff, feeling the overwhelm, defining myself through stuff, going into financial debt over stuff. I mean, it just seems like there should be more interdisciplinary conversations here, or more interdisciplinary action or interaction, within these definitions. I'm just surprised that there's less of it. One of the points I really want to make here is that the world is not a limitless place with limitless resources. If all we did was switch to buying, organic and non-GMO vegetables and got certified cotton, we'd still be heading towards a climate crisis. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry about the GMO stuff. I can't. So many of these websites talk about organics and GMOs like they're saying, okay, I can't get on this high horse here. We can't buy our way out of a climate crisis. We can't fix our climate crisis with stuff, yet we're acting like we can. And there's so much moralizing that happens the moment we talk about ethics. Okay, so I just grabbed my sweater and I want to present to you with 2 examples from the minimalist vegan. So they have 2 scenarios. So girl number 1 is named Anita, and she gets on Instagram. She gets an Instagram ad for a jacket from a fast fashion store. It's on sale. She buys it even though she already has a couple in her closet, and she does the exact same thing the next season. They write, for the jacket to be available at a reduced sale price, animals were slaughtered, workers were underpaid, harmful chemicals were used, and the environment suffered, all because Anita found a bargain at her favorite fast fashion store. Girl number 2 is Jamie, who's also looking for a winter coat because she, quote, literally has no other options. Jamie considers herself to be a mindful consumer and takes shopping very seriously. She wants to find a jacket that looks nice but is also vegan, fair trade, and eco-friendly. She's also happy to pay more for it if it's better quality, lasts longer, and even better if the brand offers a repair program. The article continues. Jamie is ecstatic to find a retailer with the same ethical values as her and orders her high-quality jacket at full price and told all her friends to consider shopping at the store. She feels good because she solved her wardrobe problem while dealing with the least amount of harm to others. Sure, resources were used to make this garment and there's no escaping the negative impact, but it's far better than the harmful alternatives. Jamie ultimately stays true to her values. Does this rub anybody else the wrong way? This article does exactly what a lot of other things do. They are literally shaming women for their choices instead of the companies. Of course, companies wouldn't make the $4 t-shirt if it didn't sell. I think we need both personal and corporate responsibility, but what is causing the climate crisis is not because you bought your fast fashion definitely contributes. But it's on the company to change. It's on the company to change their practices. We don't have decades to figure this out. What needs to change is the company's habits, okay? The company needs to change. They're the one who's doing the shitty thing. They need to change. And both of these terms are really focusing on personal responsibility. This girl, Anita, is being shamed because she found a bargain at her favorite fast fashion store. It's like this article is calling women who shop like this, environmental abusers or animal abusers, or there's like this really huge ethical and moral condemnation of women who shop fast fashion here. And there's more at stake, there's more at play here than what they're simplifying this as, which is also my problem. We could have thrifted the thing, didn't need to go buy it new. For just thinking about the climate would have been the better choice, not buying anything at all. Or if you're gonna write this article at all, why take the time to criticize women's choices when you could have spent the same amount of time criticizing companies and telling people how to advocate for change? You could have spent time giving people resources to how to contact your member of parliament or your senator or your congressperson. We could have been doing that and spent the exact same amount of time, but no, it's easier to put the blame on the person. And this is what bothers me when it comes to these kinds of conversations about ethics and when it comes to seeking change, is when we focus too much on personal responsibility and just get so much in judging other people's choices instead of, let's say, focusing on ourselves or advocating to others how they can promote long-lasting change. We're not going to get out of this climate crisis by getting people to switch from plastic to paper straws. I see these memes and videos all the time about people who are worried about their plastic straws and packing their own utensils when you have Kylie Jenner taking 20-minute trips across California once a week. Who's really the problem here? And it's often not the everyday person and their straw. Some of these decisions are idiotic. We just could not have a straw. Or we could hold corporations accountable. Listen, I am here for using your money to shop your values. And even for me, it's close to my heart as the small business. As someone who's trying to do small business things over here, I know what it means for somebody to shop from me. I know where that money goes. I know what it feels like. I'm going to shop a small business because it makes me feel good primarily, but also because I value giving my money to somebody who's going to support their dreams, who are using their money to support their passions, who are going after what they want in life. That's where I want my money to go. Our ethics are personal, totally. It is possible as well to enact larger change. Pull Up for Change has done some really great things in the beauty space. If we also think about other changes beyond like beauty and fashion, literal plant milks are changing the dairy industry. And if we're thinking just about the climate crisis, the number one thing you can do to mitigate the climate crisis as an individual is to be vegan. I'm not giving a PSA for veganism here or, trying to morally condemn anybody. This is just what the information stats tell us. So I'm also not trying to say that, doing ethical things makes no difference at all. Climate crisis isn't going to end when Kylie Jenner flies across LA once a week and Amazon is doing whatever the fuck they want and corporations go unchecked. And this also, in terms of ethics, isn't all about climate change or GMOs. It can just be as simple as supporting small businesses or minority-owned businesses. And when I went to this video, I thought I'd read some really cool articles about how to be a more critical shopper. And I did think that conscious consumerism would include some ethics, but I didn't think I'd be getting into this moral condemnation of women's shopping choices. I do think that the way that we use the term conscious consumer in the beauty space is a little bit different than outside it or how it's being used more generally. And I think in the beauty space, conscious consumerism is more aligned with the no-buy, overconsumption, critical thinking, and finances. Maybe this should just be called critical consumption. I guess my final thoughts on like how I'm feeling about these things, where I want to go from here. I'm disinclined to align myself with the concept of conscious consumption because it just brings up too many moral implications. I didn't realize that I was associating with that when I was using that term. And I think that mindful consumption more aligns with me or what I have been talking about so far. I've really come to appreciate the holistic nature of my approach, thinking about finances, minimalism, introspection, consumption, and ethics all together. I do think that my own personal brand of mindful consumption would benefit from a little bit more alignment between my own desires and my own actions. By that, I mean, I've been focusing so long on the money and the not shopping aspect of things that I think some other aspects have just fallen by the wayside. Ethics as an example. Again, it's not that ethics aren't for nothing. I just don't like moralizing and condemning people for their choices. If we truly want people to change, or we have this desire to educate about things that we're passionate about, moralizing and condemning people just isn't the way to go. And I'm just not a fan of that because how people make choices are really complicated. For me, when I think about ethics, what I really care about, like what I would feel good supporting and wanting to contribute, is small-owned businesses and people of color-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses. And also, I would really love to not support people who are pro-Trump or anti-abortion activists or advocates. I can say that I'm not always up and up on things, and sometimes I let things slide, even when it comes to fashion. I can say with size inclusivity, I haven't always been mindful or made that a priority, I was very aware of it, let's say, in my most recent capsule video, for better or worse. And when it comes to something like size inclusivity, this isn't about letting you guys know that I'm up and up on a specific subject, but it's literally about accessibility. What I do like about the Minimalist Vegan article is that they advocate for getting clear on your values and standards, deciding what they are, and ranking them in order of importance to influence how you shop. And I do appreciate that. I'll link the article if you want to read it below and, see how they've done it. If we do want to be conscious, and we want to shop in ways that feel mindful to us, whether that's veganism or financial accountability or not shopping or replacements only, or you really want to focus on quality or Canadian made or whatever it is, or if cost is really important to you, I think articulating what is important to you is a good idea. I would say the times that I've been the most clear on what I want, I've made some great purchases. And so if I had to create a list today, I'd probably say the number one thing would be going without or trying an alternative first. I think that a lot of us need that reminder, like if we're creating a list or a checklist of what we want to go through before we buy something, not buying something first would be a great thing to put on there because I know I could use that reminder. Do you even need to buy something, Sean? Do you even need to buy this? I think that's a mental exercise that we probably benefit from doing that a little bit more often, even me. Just because we intend to make a purchase doesn't mean that we should or need to actually make it. And this video has just been very interesting in just for me on a personal note of what I want to advocate for, or like where I want my money to go and where I would want to see changed. And the term mindful consumption, some of the definitions I've read, have really given me something to think about in the idea of mindfulness at all. And I'm wondering if there are more mindful practices that can be applied to consumption or to my own habits or the channel. And, I've had some time to sit with this content in this video before I've come to film it, and even since filming it. I think maybe a year ago, I probably would have waffled a little bit more and been like, at least when it comes to the ethical considerations, because like, what would people say if I'm saying that like we shouldn't think about ethics, or what if people thought that that's what I was saying? But that's not what I'm saying. And I guess at the end of the day with this, whether you want to call it a conscious consumption or mindful consumption, doesn't really matter. I guess that's the take. But reading these definitions have really helped me think about what I want for my own personal life and what I bring to the channel. So love to hear your thoughts in the comments, what you think about these terms and like what you feel like aligns with your beliefs. I was thinking that I would come out of this video and be able to say, listen, here's a couple things you can do to be a more mindful consumer, a more conscious consumer. And I'm not so inclined to say that now, because I think my belief of mindful consumption is different than what these two things are advocating for. And I don't want to be prescriptive either of like how you do it. Like, this is how you do the thing. If I were to make a suggestion, I feel like the first step for anybody is to get out of the mindless spending wheel. How do you start actually thinking about what you're purchasing, how you're purchasing, what criteria you use to decide to make a purchase in general? Not what you're purchasing, but how do you decide when it's right to make a purchase? I think that would probably be the first place I would start. And maybe that's a video I get really even more specific on in the next couple weeks. How to stop mindless consuming. Let me know your thoughts. Love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Love to hear everything on conscious consumer, mindful consumerism, what you thought of this video, and your own takes. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again around here soon. Bye.